Art because of the intro.
Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm with myself, Michelle DeRoche, and my bubbly little companion, Amelia Pisano. We are broadcasting live here. Doesn't it feel like a game show right there? Just the way I said that. Anyway, we're broadcasting live here on the International Public Radio via United Public Radio Network 105.3 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. The Outer Realm is fully sponsored by the amazing folks over at Folgers Coffee, who have been with us from the very beginning. So we love you. It would not be the same without you. It really wouldn't. You really are a big part of our journey. And of course, we have Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, who is an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music. Yes. It is available on Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, and most streaming platforms. So we thank you for your contribution of your voice and your music for our intros and outros. Now, tonight, after months of waiting, we welcome Dr. Irena Scott for the very first time to the show. She's going to be discussing her book, Beyond Pascagoula, the rest of the amazing story. So she'll explain all of that because it's a lot. So in order to participate in tonight's show, go on over to all of our platforms. Pick one, pick them all, have some fun. We're on UFO Paranormal Radio on YouTube, International Public Radio. We are on UFO Paranormal Radio Twitch. We are on Canada's Most Haunted, Michelle DeRoche, on Facebook. Of course, The Outer Realm with myself and Amelia. News on the Flip Side and UFO Paranormal Radio. I think I got them all. If I missed one, I don't know how, but I know. Just too many. I don't know. Oh my God. Too much.
I don't know why, but this thing is asking me to log in, and I can't get to the chat. I can see it, but I can't respond.
Oh, okay. I'll pop them up, and then you can see them on your screen, though, right?
Thank you.
Okay,
I can see the comments. I can't comment. I can't.
Okay.
Write.
Are you in private chat?
No, I thought I was. I moved to comments, and I'm not. Because in private, I could write. Here, I can't.
Yeah, because in private, we're looking at welcome all. Tonight, we welcome Dr. Irena Scott. That's in private.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
And then I went to comments, and I'm like, why can't I get it? It says log in, sign in, free.
Yeah, because I'm the only one that can see it, Joe and I. So
yeah, I know.
We're going to put our shout out to Wayne. We're going to put our shout out to Zach Mann.
Yep.
And Testing International Public Radio. Okay. So, yeah, here we are. Pass the test. Okay.
Yeah, I can see. I just can't. I can't type.
Oh, so gosh.
I don't want to.
I know. So
oh my gosh, this camera's really, really unsteady.
So she's going to be coming on soon, I'm thinking, about quarter after ballpark. So, how was your day? All right.
Wonderful, wonderful.
With that being said, dare I ask?
Wonderful.
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 Like yeah, I had a day like that myself.
Yes, beautiful.
This is beautiful, wonderful. It's
my father would say perfetto, perfetto.
Right. All right then.
It was a wake up with ridiculous drama. It just kept going all day. So, but it's okay. The day's ended, and I'm here in my happy place with Michelle and you guys. So it's all good now. It's all good.
Okay. Well, it's going to be a really good show because I know that Joe and I on the Gray Zone touched a little bit, ironically enough, on the Pascagoula UFO event. I think, if memory serves me right, that is in, or was in the 70s
know.
in Mississippi. I don't have all of the, the whole thing on it because the show wasn't technically about that event. But I
Yeah.
know Dr. Irena is going to speak about her book, which comes after that. So I'm kind of hoping she'll give us the events of that also.
I know.
Because like,
I
what?
just
Yeah.
I just want to let Wayne know,
Yeah.
yes, I'm well aware it's shaking. I'm trying to stay still because I actually hit the table. See, every time I just touch.
Ah,
So I'm getting I'm not using this laptop anymore. I'm actually going to get a screen so that it sits on the table and the camera doesn't move like this because the laptop is, tilted
right.
to
Make it
reach.
look like
So
it's like a little
it's
bobblehead.
shaking. I'm sorry.
A little
And I
red
am a
bobblehead.
little bobblehead. So
Yeah.
it's very fitting. Apparently, not as much as I thought after a few phone calls today. I realized
good.
that I'm actually the smarter one in that group. But anyway,
Well, that's good news. So
yeah,
maybe we should read the bio.
sure. And I
Bio.
normally I have it on
The
on a
screen.
board behind me,
Yeah.
but it's a longer bio and it's very interesting. And I don't even have everything in it, so I need the time.
We'll
on
just
the
give it
paper.
a a condensed version because I'm sure
I
she's going
did.
to be on it. Okay, good, perfect.
I did.
Let
Because
her
I
rip.
think these things are all important to introduce our guest tonight. She's really amazing. Dr. Irena Scott is an astronomer, teacher, biologist, and author employed by the DIA, researched in satellite photography, which involved aircraft identification with above top secret sensitive compartmented information clearances. Say that 3 times fast. From 1993 to 2000, Dr. Scott served on the MUFON board of directors as director of publications and is a consultant in physiology, astronomy, as well as a field investigator. Dr. Scott was a featured speaker of the 2019 50th anniversary of the MUFON Symposium. The International MUFON Symposium, rather. A list of Dr. Scott's books can be found on the Outer Realm Facebook group page, along with a list of her degrees in education and the rest of her links. Let's please give her a great welcome when she comes to Dr. Irena Scott.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Okay, how are you people?
Well, we're better now.
Yeah.
It's always great when the guests actually show up because there's no technical difficulties. It's that time of year, depending where you're located, with storms and
Yes.
outages.
Everything else.
No, exactly. No, exactly. So my goodness, how are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome.
I'm just fine, and I'm glad I'm here, and there's no failures to be on. You had it second.
We are so honored to have you here tonight.
Yes, yes.
Very honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's quite the resume. My gosh, I'm trying to read through the bio. The social media wouldn't even accept it all. It's just so long. We're like, oh my God, where do you even cut it off to get it in there? So, I had to try to improvise. But I do like to start off every segment with basically humble beginnings, just to give the guests a chance to know who you are and what brought you to the point where you are tonight, where we're going to be discussing your work and your research and your books. So maybe give us some insight into you. Did the whole UFO thing, are you an experiencer, you're an abductee, and what brought you in?
Oh, what brought me in? I've always been in science. And so, science isn't exactly friendly to UFOs, as maybe people notice.
True.
And so I was in the closet for a long time, but I had close encounters and experiences since I was a small kid.
Wow.
And eventually I decided to come out of the UFO closet and talk about it.
Right. Can you talk about what it was like as a young Irena having these experiences? Because It's not like you could talk about it back in the day. I certainly couldn't,
Well, it was hard to talk about because I didn't know anything about what was going on.
Right. But how did you feel? Like, what was your experiences like?
Horrible. The first one was long before, we were very poor, and we lived in an old farmhouse, and my sister and I slept in an attic room, on two sides of an attic room, and it had walls that sloped up and went to about 3 feet in the middle of the room. And our parents actually were farming with horses a few years before that. And when they got electricity, we had a radio, but that was our media. And we'd never heard of UFOs or spaceships or anything else at the time.
Wow.
And my sister and I were, I think I was about 6 and she was about 4. And we were sleeping. And I woke up and there was this thing flying around the room. I had no idea what it was. It looked like a little piece of metal. Actually, it looked like a cough drop. And it glowed. And I watched it. And it just kind of took a random movement around the room. And it kind of got close to us a few times. But at that young age, I noticed that it seemed to be able to know where it was. The room was dark. There were 2 doors and a window, and the window was screened and the doors were closed. It was a clear night, and my sister was in the other bed, and I didn't know she was awake. I guess she apparently knew I was awake, but it was flying around the room. And what I noticed about it was that it seemed to know where things were. I mean, there's furniture in the room and walls and things, and it would go up like to a wall and then turn and to furniture and go around and things like that. It didn't hit anything, and it just looked like a piece of metal, but it seemed to know where it was going, and it was just kind of like browsing around. And then after a while, it flew up to the ceiling on the south end of the room, and before it got to the ceiling, it turned so it didn't bump into the ceiling. And it flew across the ceiling to the chandelier, which is in the middle of the room. And then it seemed to know where the chandelier and the walls were, because the chandelier was between the 2 walls. And it flew to the chandelier and it began to circle, just a perfect circle around, not where the walls were. It didn't feel around or anything. And then after a while, it just spiraled down like the spiral was in the middle of the chandelier. At that point, I became absolutely terrified, so terrified you couldn't believe it. And my sister began shrieking, and we both ran screaming from the room. We bumped into each other and fell down the stair steps, and we just clawed at the door. We were so terrified we couldn't get it open. Finally, we got it open and ran into our parents shrieking and screaming.
Of course, right? Help, help.
They didn't believe us.
Wow, that would be terrifying, when you're just a little kid, like they start really early. Did this become something was this like a frequent occurrence with you guys, or did it just happen once in a while? Did it evolve from that point on?
Well, we didn't know what UFOs were or anything else, and I really didn't know it had something to do with UFOs until many years later, when a person called Jenny Randalls wrote a book and talked about bedroom visitations of children, and saying that often kids have small things like UFOs in their room when they're children, and then later they grow up and see UFOs. And my sister and I were different from everybody else because there were 2 of us that happened to us. And like my parents said, well, we were lying or something, but there were 2 of us, and we both, saw it without discussing it. So
a little bit harder to discredit too, right?
Of course they did anyway, but
Yeah, of course, that's what parents do.
we didn't believe them.
Right. Yeah. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, they think it's your imagination.
Yeah.
Making up stories, and it's a different time too. I don't know. That's difficult. How did you feel when they didn't believe you? Were you afraid?
Well, my father told us to get back upstairs, and he said he threatened to beat us up, and we didn't go. And finally, my mother told him to go up and look around. He looked around, said everything was fine, and so we went back up, but we weren't very thrilled about it.
No, I guess not. Oh my gosh. So let's fast forward from that point on then. Um, what made you decide? I mean, was it from these experiences and you started getting an idea of what this was all about? What made you decide to, obviously you got your doctorate and you said, okay, I'm going to concentrate on UAPs or UFOs, extraterrestrials.
Well, I didn't concentrate on them until I was near retirement, but we had other sightings too, and we had another one together, a
Right.
very long, complicated one.
Wow.
We almost got killed.
Oh my gosh, what happened?
Well, what happened was that we were in Ohio when the first one happened. Later, after we grew up, she was at Drew University in New Jersey, and I was working for the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C. And so we were both on the East Coast, and we decided to take a vacation and go up and see the New England states.
Mm.
And so I drove from Washington up to New York or in New Jersey and picked her up and took some pictures, and some people I worked with drove up with me and got off at New York. And then we drove on we were going to stay at Boston at night and then go around and look at the New England states. But we got there pretty early. And so we drove on up to New Hampshire and drove up quite a ways in New Hampshire and turned around and came back. And I found out later that we were kind of in some of the area where the Hill UFO abduction took place. I don't know if that had anything to do with anything. But we came back to Boston and began looking around for rooms and couldn't find any. So we decided to go out and look around the outer belt. And so we were leaving Boston. And as we were leaving, there was a airport south of us called the Norwood Memorial Airport. And we could see airplanes coming in and putting their landing lights on and landing. We see their red and green lights on their wings and everything. And but there was one thing that was a lot lower than the airplanes, and it was a white blinking light. And I just kind of ignored it because I was looking for motels, and my sister kept saying, this is something odd. Mm-hmm. And she said, she thought it was a UFO. Well, I just said, she's crazy, I told her. And it was a helicopter blinking its landing lights. And I'd never seen anything like a helicopter blinking its landing lights, but I was saying they can, explaining what it was. Mm-hmm. And so we were kind of arguing. And we both admitted to each other we'd had other UFO sightings, which was the first we talked about it to each other at all. And so I drove to the freeway, the outer belt, and was driving down it. And then I was driving down 95, which is the main East Coast freeway type thing. And we were driving along and kind of arguing. There was a woods to the west of us. And I looked into the woods, and there was this thing like a ball, and it had light in the middle. And the light was going in different spectrum, like of all red and then all blue and then all green. I mean, all blue and then back to red again. And it just keep going through the spectrum. And there seemed to be something outside that seemed to be circling it, or like a globe or something. Mm. I had no idea what it was. And then the inside of the car lit up in green. And I had no idea what that was either. And I didn't know where the green was coming from. And I looked at the thing of light, and it wasn't green. It was shades of red and blue. So I couldn't figure out what was going on. And the green was in the car for a while. And I didn't see green any place, so I didn't know why the inside of the car was green. And so we kept on driving. And then my sister began to just scream at me and tell me that thing was going over the big thing. We were watching the white light that was blinking, that it was going to go over the freeway. And so I still thought she was crazy. And I decided to stop because she was really yelling at me. So I stopped. And I was going to point my hand out the window and say, "See, ding bat, it's a helicopter." I pointed my hand
Term
out.
of endearment. Dingbat works.
I love that word. We have to bring it back. I love it.
Right here tonight on the Outer Realm.
It's so Archie Bunker. I love it.
I know. So you put your arm out, and much to your surprise, there was a not helicopter.
Yeah, I saw a meteor way out in the distance, and then right where I saw the meteor, this thing came over the road. And she was right and I was wrong, but I didn't admit it immediately. But apparently, years later, we both wrote up descriptions. And she said that right then she saw the inside of the car light up in blue light. And I didn't see that, but I was by the window. But the thing that came over the road was real low. We could see it distinctively. There were 7 square things that looked like windows that were lit up and blinking in a pattern. And it was sort of shaped like a very big cough drop or something, like a Tic Tac that they say today.
Oh, yes, a capsule. Yeah.
Yeah. And it had one red light on one end and one green light on the other that weren't blinking at all, but they were pretty dim. And the square lights in the middle, the square window type things, we discussed it then. Are these panels or are they windows? And we both thought they were windows. And we both seen blimps that had lighted sides. In fact, I have a YouTube channel and I have blimps with lighted sides on it. We used to have a blimp that flew around here with a TV show on its sides and things like that. Mm-hmm. So we kind of knew that it wasn't a blimp, and we also thought we were looking in windows. Mm-hmm. And they were blinking in a pattern, like the first 3 would blink on and off twice, and then all 7 would blink on and off, and then the last 4 would blink on and off, and then it'd go through the same thing. I'm not too sure what pattern it was, something like that. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I realized that this wasn't a helicopter. Mm-hmm. And I had a...
Your sister was not a dingbat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. It wasn't. And so I had a Polaroid camera in the car and a high-speed film with me. And so I decided I'd better load up my camera because I thought I could just take the most wonderful picture you could ever imagine. I was working in DIA and photography. Mm. And I thought, I could get a picture of a UFO, inside the UFO, and if I could get stereo or something, I could get a stereo picture. And I thought I could just take a wonderful picture. And so I was loading my camera. And just then a truck driver pulled over in front of us and a man came back. And I thought, this will be great. We'll have another witness. And he came over and stood beside me. And this thing was going over, and I was just missing the most wonderful picture you could ever imagine. But I was kind of scared of him. He was standing by me, and he said, "What are you doing?" And that seemed funny because this thing was going over the road. And I pointed at it, but I didn't say UFO or anything. And he just rotated around in the opposite direction, looked exactly opposite, and said, "I don't see anything." Then he rotated back around and looked at me. And he said the same thing, "What are you doing?" And I pointed again. He rotated around, looked in exactly the opposite direction of where the thing was, and said, "I don't see anything," rotated back. And then he gave a gesture. I think he pointed to his head or something like that that made me think I was cuckoo. Back to the truck. And I had just missed a wonderful picture. And my sister, in her description, said at that time that the object just seemed to get in another place. And I didn't notice that until I read her description years later. But I was trying to get the picture. And I was on the freeway and I had high-speed film. And so I thought I'd better get off the freeway. And there was a hill on one side. And so I ran to the hill and I was going to climb it. And my sister kept trying to stop me. And I kept telling her to guard the car. And she didn't seem to understand what I meant. But anyway, I climbed up the hill and I did get a picture. And actually, I reported the picture in a scientific journal because it had some interesting things once I understood it. But I came back and the object went over to the airport, and it began to circle. And it'd circle in this, where it'd take a half circle from south to north, and it'd blink twice on this half circle. Then from north to south, it'd just be so fast you couldn't see it, and it began circling. Well, I thought, I was just terribly disappointed because I didn't get the picture. And so I thought I'd turn the car around at the next intersection. I thought it was going to go north. It had been going south. And then try to follow it if it went north. I didn't know what direction it was going to go, but I thought it might go north. So I got on the freeway, and the truck driver drove right in behind me, got right on my bumper, and began to follow me or chase me or whatever. And I couldn't get rid of him. If I changed lanes, he changed lanes. If I slowed down or speeded up, he did the same thing. And I thought he was going to kill us because he had his bright lights on and they were shining right in my mirror. And I was just blinded. I was on this freeway, and I thought I could get away from him if I sped. And so I floored it right behind me.
Wow.
And I thought he was going to knock us off the road or something, and I couldn't see. And so I decided to try to, on the left-hand side of the road, to swerve whenever I got to an intersection, just right when I got there. And maybe he wouldn't be able to follow me because he wouldn't know I was going to do that. So I did it. I got, and so I turned around at the intersection and came back, and the thing was still circling the airport, but then it decided to go northwest. And so I followed the freeway back up and past the green light, past the car, inside the car turned green again when I passed that light that was still there on the side of the road. And so I followed the thing, and it was going northwest, and the roads went like north and south and east and west, so it was hard. We had to zigzag. But I really wanted to try to get a picture, and my sister was just trying. She couldn't figure out why she couldn't see anything inside it, because we had seen the inside, and you couldn't see anything except just this real bright light. So finally, I wound up following it on this real old gravel road that had houses about a mile apart from each other that you couldn't turn around. It was just a little bit faster, and I could go because the road was bumpy and it was gravel. And so finally, I turned around, and we had to go back. And we couldn't find any more hotel rooms, and we went all the way back to New Jersey.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's a hike.
Drive.
Yeah.
It was a long drive.
Yeah.
And then the next night, I went back to Washington, D.C., and I had a poltergeist experience. And then the whole thing was over with after that.
Wow. So do you think the poltergeist experience was associated with the UFO experience?
When it happened, like I was in science, I was DIA and physical science and all that.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of poltergeist, and I didn't understand what was going on. I thought I'd just gone crazy.
Right.
But later, I found out that oftentimes that people that have close encounters with UFOs have poltergeist experiences.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
At the time, I didn't know, and I had this real high security clearance, and I was scared to death that I might have gone crazy. And I was trying to figure out how to go to work and look like a normal person when I was afraid I might be insane.
Oh, no.
Oh,
yeah.
my gosh. I could only imagine.
Wow. That's intense. Like, that's really intense, because that usually experiences are really quick, you know? And yeah, this does seem to really go on and on and on, like it hung in there. And I'm not surprised that the man could not see the craft, because that happens, doesn't it? Like, not everybody is meant to see them.
Well, what was funny is that, when you point at something, the person will look, a normal person will look at where you point.
Yeah.
Around and look in the exact opposite position each time and said,
and he's looking at you like this. I'd be going, what is that? What are you looking at?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is insane. What was that poltergeist experience like? What happened?
What happened was that I went to bed that night, and there was a little bit of light coming in a window from a street light. But I started hearing a sound like a man walking in my room, and like it'd be like a man with shoes on. It'd take 2 or 3 steps, and then it'd be someplace else. And when it was close to the bed, I tried to feel it. I couldn't see anything, and I was scared to death. But I went to sleep, and then my alarm went off, and I woke up, and I thought it was morning, and I started getting breakfast, and I thought it's dark out, and I looked at the clock, and it was 1:30, and my clock had a turning thing, but it was broken off, and it was just impossible to set it. If I set it by hand, it was plus or minus 15 minutes, or I usually set it with pliers. But I tried to reset it, and for some reason, I went back to sleep, and then the alarm went off again. It was exactly 2:30, exactly 3:30, exactly 4:30, and then I don't remember if it was 5:30 or not. But then I got up, and it was morning, and I was just sitting there in the bed trying to figure out, am I crazy, and what's going to happen to my security clearance and my job if I am, and what should I do, and how can I get through work and not talk to anybody? And my toothbrush flew across the room and hit a wall. And then the whole thing was over, thank heavens.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
that's scary.
Crazy. Here's a comment. Daniel, you can see it?
Yep.
Okay, you want to read
that I guess I can see. I can't
I'll put
respond.
it up so you could see them. Yeah.
Thank you. Down in Yuma, Arizona, out at the General Mine I work for.
Gem Mine.
Gem Mine, sorry. Yeah. I work for. We have seen so many strange things and triangle shaped ships. Yeah, it turns out I can't see that clear.
I am totally not surprised with Arizona.
No.
And Dave says perceive different dimensions. Yeah. So that was pertaining to not everybody being able to see the ships. Well, I think that came in when that comment was there. I did not want to interrupt you with that. So you survived the poltergeist activity and having to go into work, and that would have been an experience. So from there, then did you decide at that point, okay, there's something to this and I want to know how I fit in?
No, I didn't decide that because I was working for the Defense Intelligence Agency with a real high
right there. Right there is enough right there.
I mean, not be working, absolutely. I mean, we were in air or battle, and we were supposed to identify airplanes from satellite photography, and it was real classified. But and so I didn't, and I was the only female. I was the only female, so I didn't say, "Well, I see UFOs too."
No, you don't want to.
Yeah, that's not something you want to disclose.
No,
they don't. Why should you?
Yeah.
Another comment.
Oh, Zachman said, "Yep, I'm in Arizona, seen plenty of things out in the desert at night. Absolutely, that's one of the reasons why you'd notice it so easily.
Exactly.
Desolate."
It was years and years and years after I said something about it when I got a lot closer to retirement and everything.
Right. Yeah, it's safe then. What could he possibly do?
Kind of like our Minister of Defense. He didn't say anything well after the retirement. Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's a smart move.
He became a real spokesperson after that.
Yes.
So, okay. So you're on the verge of retiring and you decide you're going to just do it. Put it out there.
Well, I didn't exactly say anything at work. I actually, what my book is about is the Pascagoula Abduction. It's about everything else that happened besides that.
Right.
And something else that happened with Pascagoula Abduction was what actually got me into it.
So can you touch on that whole event, like briefly, just so people have an idea what that actually is before you go off with the book, because that is beyond Pascagoula, right?
Uh-huh. The Pascagoula Abduction is probably one of the very best known abductions of all. And it happened to these two men. One was Charles Hickson, who was about 45, and a young one, 18, Calvin Parker. They were working for a shipyard employees, and they were just regular, normal people. They weren't UFO people or anything like that, just normal. And they finished their day of work and they decided to go fishing. And so they went a couple of places. They didn't find any fish, so they went to this other place, and I think it said no trespassing and stuff. And the other man was nervous because it was his car, and he was afraid they'd get in trouble with the police. The older man said, "Oh, I fish here all the time. There's no problem." And so they walked for some distance from the car and went out on this pier fishing. And they saw this blue light, and they both thought, "Uh-oh, that's the police." And the younger man said, well, to the older man, "Well, you can go to jail because that was your idea," and all that. So it was a lot worse than police, though, because this object appeared. It was kind of floating, and these things came out of it that were kind of like beings. They were kind of like robots or something. And two of them grabbed the older man, one grabbed the younger man, and they went inside the thing. Obviously, the men would have fought back, and they were terrified. They were grabbed and taken. And they both thought that they'd been giving shots or something, because suddenly they couldn't move, and they felt real relaxed when they were, terrified. And they took them in and made it look like they were making measurements on them, like this thing would come out of the wall and circle them and things like that, like something was measuring them or scanning them or something. And then these things took them back out. And when the younger man, he said he was just standing there with his arms up like that afterwards. And the older man, they tried to wake each other up and things afterwards. And then the thing left, and they were both just, practically having a nervous breakdown. They had this happen to them. They couldn't move, and they were moved inside the ship and everything, and it took a while and came back out. And anyway, they discussed it first of all and said, "We're not going to tell anybody," because they were shipyard workers, saying, you can imagine what.
Same idea in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
And
nobody could talk then. No one could speak about experiencing things like that then without a lot of, prejudice and a lot of people thinking that they're insane.
Or crazy or lying or drunk.
Yes.
And, combination. And so they decided not to tell anybody. But the older man had been in the military, had been in active fighting, and he'd had life and death situations. And so he had been through that. The younger man was just terrified, and he didn't want to tell anybody ever about it. But the older man decided we should report that. And so I think they started by contacting a newspaper, and the newspaper said, forget about it. They were closed, and they called the Air Force Base, the near Air Force Base, and the Air Force Base said, "Oh, we don't collect that. Project Blue Book closed." We told them to contact local authorities, so they did contact the older man. The younger man didn't want to do anything.
I'm not doing it.
And so anyway, then they contacted the sheriffs, and the police came out, and the older man had called and said, "You won't believe this," and how you'd feel in that situation, and told them they'd been abducted by a UFO. And I talked to other police. I interviewed a whole lot of people in that area, and another policeman said the thing went out and said, "Oh, we picked up a couple of drunks," or saying they picked up a UFO and stuff, but they took them in.
Right.
And interviewed each of them separately. And then they put them in a room together and interviewed them, and the man left and came back. And what they'd done, the police had done, is they had hidden a tape recorder in the room with them. And so this tape recorder was going when the policeman left. And they thought, this way, if they're hoaxing, well, they'll get it, because when the policeman left, they would laugh and everything, say, well, we really put one over. But instead, they were just terrified. And it wasn't like they were practicing anything. It was like they were just terrified. They were talking this clip type of way about, and the younger man said, I thought I died and things like that, and things. And so the police believed him. And also that night there had been about 50 official calls to the police that other people saw things, and a lot of unofficial calls too. So they had a lot more credibility because of that mystery tape, which would never have happened, if the police hadn't really done a good job of investigating. And so that hit the news all over the world really fast. And it's one of the top abduction accounts ever.
Yeah. I know that we touched on a show last week, Joe and I. Wasn't there a police chief in the town of Falkville, Alabama, who had a similar experience? But when he went to the newspapers with it, they just basically, because I know he and I covered this as briefly, they basically thought that it was just made up because we're trying to discredit that other event. They were just trying to because it happened like 3 days apart, apparently 3 or 4 days apart. So they're just trying to say, no, it was fake. They were just trying to discredit the event. He lost his job over it, everything.
And I don't know about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. That was a thing. Yeah. He went in, he took pictures. He's got photographs of it, everything. And they were, they couldn't debunk the photos. And he showed where it happened. It sounded like your event down that dirt freaking road. He's got his Polaroid out taking pictures.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looked almost robotic, exactly like what you say.
That is so scary. I'm sorry.
I know. I can send you the pictures if you want.
Oh, I've seen them.
Okay. Yeah.
I heard that it was been investigated, but I just don't know.
The Falkville one. Yeah. The chief's pictures. Yeah. Yeah. So you decided that this warranted further research. And you decided, no, I'm going to write a book on this and talk about what maybe coulda, woulda, shoulda, didn't happen.
No. What got me into it is that something happened to me at just about the same time that abduction took place. I was in Missouri at the University of Missouri studying on my PhD, and one night my mother called, and she said, "Did you hear that noise?" Well, she was in Columbus, Ohio, 600 miles away, and so I started teasing her and harassing her and saying,
Do you remember when? Yeah.
Get a picture.
That's right. Do you remember when we two little girls went running in?
Yeah. Well, she had always said that if she was having dementia, we should tell her. And so I started joking and saying, well, it's time, turn yourself in, and everything.
Right.
But she continued to ask me, did you hear that noise? Like she was serious. And I kept joking with her. And I couldn't understand what, she's a skeptic, or she was. And so several days later, she called and said there was a huge UFO flap going on, and that people were staying in at night and keeping their kids in. And a UFO had chased one of her best friends in a car, and that all kinds of people were seeing him. And it just sounded like something, like a war zone or something.
Oh, wow.
And from her, it was very funny to hear. And then I just forgot about it for years because I was in Missouri. Later, I moved back to Ohio. And I was working at Ohio State University. I should say the Ohio State University, and everybody. Anyway, I was working there, and they had a newspaper room in the library with actual newspapers. So you didn't, wear out your eyeballs looking at microfilm and everything. And so I just thought one day I would go in and see if I can find when that sound was. And so I went in. There were newspapers like you couldn't believe. And I thought, well, I'm never going to find it. But I had a very, just guessing at when it happened. And so I pulled out newspapers for the middle of October 1973, and that was a wild guess, but I found it pretty soon, which, to my surprise. But there was a sound, and nobody had ever been able to explain it. And so I just, for some reason, I started investigating it, and it was a pretty weird sound. It was heard for a long distance and everything. And so I was going to write up a paper in a scientific journal, and the seismologist, the state of Ohio seismologist, contacted me, and he was interested and helped me. And so I did get a paper published on it. And I call it the Big Boom and everything.
Right.
At that point, there were UFO investigators in Ohio, and they contacted me to give a talk on the Big Boom. And so I did. And that's what drew me into ufology. So actually something that happened the same time as Pascagoula was what got me, out of my, dormancy and everything and into ufology.
Right.
But I didn't go around work and say anything about it, but people found out at work and harassed me anyway.
Yeah, well, that's all right though. Hey, what counts is you're here. So, you got you kind of got shoved into it, but I think it was your calling. Getting back to the sound, can you describe this sound? Just a curiosity, because I've heard sounds before.
Well, this was what was odd about it was unexplained, and it made headlines across half the country. It was first heard in Iowa, and it went across the country. Like there were newspaper articles right along saying the time of things until it went to the Atlantic coast, which was a real long ways away. It started about 8:20 and got there about 9. And it had happened exactly the time as the Pascagoula thing. Well, I mean, as close as you could call. I mean, they didn't have watches when it happened, but that night, after dark and everything like that, it was. It went across Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, and Washington, D.C., and clear down. It was very, very widespread. In the East, it was heard all the way from New York into Tennessee. And there was basically no explanation for it. Nobody saw a plane, nobody saw a meteorite or a meteor or anything else. Nobody saw anything. They didn't get anything on radar. But something obviously went across the country. And so at that time, they always say scientists are debunkers. Well, I contacted a number of scientists, and the people at OSU helped me examine it. And they weren't debunkers, they kind of helped me. But later, I published in the MUFON Journal, which is a UFO publication. Yeah. And so I wrote in and debunked away at that. I mean, not the whole MUFON, but somebody did. And then I kind of weakly debunked my debunker and said, well, the sound wasn't where he explained it as an airplane, SR-71, one of those big things that go fast. And so I debunked him and said, well, the sound wasn't where the airplane was, because it was known where the airplane was. But then later, within the last few years, NASA has published a lot of information on sonic booms and things like that. And also you can do better literature searches. And so I did a lot of literature searches on all those states that crossed and got as good a times as I could get for when they heard the sound. And the sound, the physics of the sound didn't agree anything with a sonic boom, because an airplane has a sonic boom that just kind of follows it around in pathway, and they know how far it is and how high the airplane is and everything. And this was way bigger than anything that would come from an airplane. And so the scientists had explained it as at first they explained it as an airplane, later they explained it as a meteor. But it calculate times and things. It actually registered on 2 seismographs, and that's pretty amazing to have something from the air.
Yeah.
And so I could get a real exact time for those 2 seismographs and get a speed and things. And it wasn't a meteorite speed at all, or a meteor speed.
Dave says he can look at the date and time astrologically if you'd like. And he works in astrology, all kinds of different things. You can see what he can find for you.
Well, it was at the same time as the Pascagoula. It was October the 11th, 1973. And at that time it was for EST, about 8:20 to before 9.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there we go. And here we go. Producer wants to know, what color are your eyes and what is your blood type?
Wow.
Oh, yeah, I know. I think
there's a
he's
method
trying
to
to
his
date.
madness.
Be careful, Dr. Irene. I think he's trying to go out with you.
Yeah. It's totally UFO related, I can assure you.
Yeah, I know it is.
Because there is a theory that the RH negative blood, of course, is not from here.
No, I'm
And
not RH negative.
you are not?
Eyes are more or less hazel.
Right. And you are RH negative?
No, I'm
No,
not.
you're not. There you go, Joe. There we go. So that's okay. I know a lot of RH positive people have been abducted too, blue-eyed. But it's true because, it's just like, ICAR, which is his organization. It's probably one of the largest in the world. It's got about 60 or 70,000 abductee and contactee experiencers that are part of this organization. And they pretty much broke the whole news on the RH negative and how it doesn't seem to come from here. Nobody can really seem to trace it. The same with brown eyes are always normal, but other color eyes up to 30,000 years ago did not exist. So he'll always seem to do that. He goes, okay, one more added to the list. Okay,
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Okay, hold on. Dave wants to know 8:20 to 9 p.m. Pascagoula, and what other town is what he's asking you. You mentioned another town that it went through.
Oh,
near Pascagoula.
The sound wasn't at Pascagoula. It started out in Iowa.
Iowa.
And sort of south of Chicago, like one of the places it was heard was Galesville, Illinois, and then it was heard through the center of Illinois and Indiana and Ohio and Pennsylvania, and then into Maryland, clear up to New York, and clear down to.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was huge.
That's all the way almost to the Midwest. Wow.
I mean, I think it was the most extensive sound ever heard recorded, except for the Krakatoa volcano explosion. It was just huge.
Amelia, want to get that?
Sure, thank you. The creepy abduction story by E.T. Robots reminds me of an E.T. encounter story in the USA back in the 1960s and 70s, where a bow hunter was lost out in the woods at night and he was chased up by a tree.
Yeah.
Up a tree by some. Wow.
Well, I remember that.
I need a new prescription. Okay, that's 2 time
yeah.
zones.
Wow. Yeah, you might be chased up a tree by robots. Yeah, that's crazy. He'll get back to you, Irena. Okay. All right, Dave, we'll leave that with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. Because now I guess, robots, is that what we would consider artificial intelligence now in more modern times? Holograms.
Wow.
Yeah, he thought they were like robots.
Yeah.
And I think he pulled somebody's cloth off and lit his clothes on fire and threw them down, and they sort of scared the thing. I can't remember too well. There were little things like robots that were down under the tree, and he was afraid they were going to come up and get him, I guess, or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's a little bit out there. First of all, who the heck wants to be like out at night? Jesus, lots of crap in those woods. Just saying. These are some of the last things you need to worry about. My gosh.
Crazy.
Okay. So you decided to put your book together. You decided it needed more research. By what did he say here? Sorry, while he's on it.
No, he said try some ET Greys and 2 ET robots.
Okay, buy some ET Greys. Okay, robots.
Buy.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I really need a new prescription on these glasses. Seriously.
So obviously there was something missing to the story. So you decided to research it.
No, what happened next was that Philip Mantle of Flying Disc Press.
Yes. I love
published
Philip.
one of my books.
Yes.
And then he became interested in the Pascagoula story.
Yes.
And there were other witnesses showing up then that had the nerve to report things that happened.
Right.
And he wanted somebody in the United States to interview him. And so he asked me. And I had, the equipment to record the interviews with people's permission and things. And so I was interviewing other witnesses in Pascagoula.
Right.
And so the two things came together.
Wow. Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I had, started into UFOs on this other thing that happened at the same time as the Pascagoula thing. And I wasn't even interested in the Pascagoula. I was interested in the noise.
Right.
But then I started interviewing the people from Pascagoula, and both together, that's what's told in the book.
Right. Right. Okay, so tell us about the book. Tell us about the information that you found, because it looks like it completely spins off of that.
Yeah, there were a lot of new things that were reported that hadn't been reported before. One thing, I interviewed a lot of people, and one of the first people I interviewed, Philip Mantle, had found out about him because Calvin Parker had given a talk at the library in Pascagoula, and it had been on YouTube. And this woman wrote a comment to YouTube and said, well, she knew it was true because her parents had been there and seen it.
Wow.
And so Philip contacted them and got the name, and I called her. And her husband was a skeptic, and he didn't believe anything that happened. And so, first of all, I talked to her husband. I mean, he said, talk to her husband, and I did. And he said something about a big splash in a blimp. And then he, just real fast, and he handed the phone to his wife, and she said, oh, he doesn't, he's a skeptic and everything. Mm-hmm. And what she said was that they had been on the other side of the Pascagoula River from Calvin and Charles on the same night. And they'd seen this object flying around the river. And it was just a random type of flying. And she thought it was an airplane, and she couldn't figure out what was going on. She said the pilot must be lost. It didn't look exactly like an airplane. She couldn't figure out what was going on. I mean, at that time, she didn't know anything about the abduction or anything. And so she and her husband were waiting because the ship was out on the end of the pier, and her husband was to meet his supervisor, and they were to go out on the ship. But his supervisor was late, and so they were sitting in the car waiting for him to show up. So then finally her husband said, well, I'll take my clothes out to the car. And he was walking ahead with his clothes, and she was walking behind him. And this thing came out of the water right beside her on the pier, and it looked like a man. And she was terrified, and her husband said, oh, there's nothing. And they walked on down to the ship, and then she came back about 12, and she said she was just terrified, and she ran back the pier and jumped in the car and left. Well, I called her several more times because she seemed so emotional about this thing that came out of the water. And I asked her, could it be a fish? And she said, no. Could it be a dolphin? No. And she just seemed really emotional about it. And I couldn't figure out why she was so emotional. And we wrote and called each other quite a bit for quite a while. And then her husband became very ill. I mean, this happened in 1973, and she and her husband were just newlyweds
Right.
and all. And since then, they'd raised a family, and their kids had grown up and everything else. But she still remembered this thing. And then he became very ill and unfortunately died. But right before he went on a ventilator, he told her that they'd been abducted. And he, being a man and working, you wouldn't want to go around saying that.
No.
But he was close to, he kind of knew he was going to die and things.
Right.
And he decided to say something. And so he told her they'd been abducted and that he could remember these things coming and getting him and taking him on board. And then he could remember them swimming across the water, and he could remember the UFO flying away some distance away.
Wow.
And so anyway, she reported that and even took a video of it and gave it to Philip Mantle. And then he went on a ventilator, and she really wanted to find out more, but he couldn't talk because he was on a ventilator. And then unfortunately he died. But so
wow.
it might have been just a real unusual thing, because they might have been abducted the same time as Calvin and Charles, and the same time and location, and possibly by the same object. This would be something totally new in ufology.
Well, yeah, because how many people either did not have a recollection, or how many who just weren't talking? I think it would have made life a lot easier for these two guys that really took a big hit, with their credibility.
Yeah, they were harassed a whole lot, and there were a lot of other observations at that same time, but they were harassed so much that everybody else was scared to say anything.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, just from everything you were saying about what these guys went through, I think had other witnesses come forward, it would have saved them a lot of aggravation. Okay, I'm gonna put these up, Amelia. So Tom is continuing.
I'm squinting with glasses on. Tom says, I think he also managed to keep them at bay by shooting arrows at them and throwing loose change at them.
Loose change, I like that. Go away, I'll pay you.
His arrows. Okay, and then there's a part 2 to that, the one underneath.
Yeah.
The live chat won't let me type anymore. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's true. They don't let you type as much.
No,
okay.
It's kind of like any social media.
I like that. He's in the tree throwing loose change at them.
That's funny.
Go
well,
away.
anything, right? Anything you have, it's a survival instinct, right?
Hey, you do what you gotta do.
Meanwhile, they're probably going like this.
I know. Okay.
I remember something else. I think that these things, that some kind of gas came out of their mouth and it came up and would make him sick or become unconscious. It seems like I remember something like that from.
Wow.
I may remember too clearly, but it seems like something that made him become unconscious.
Wow.
Yeah, that's.
I think he strapped himself in the tree so he wouldn't fall out.
Yeah, well, smart. My gosh, because you don't hear about things like that anymore. I mean,
coming out of their mouth.
It's like, did ET just evolve?
I'm not. I just remember it from way back, but I think I remember something like that. I remember him throwing down. I was thinking he was lighting his clothes on fire and throwing them down, but he was something. Yeah, throwing something.
Burn down the tree that's hiding you. What the heck? Wow. I don't know, but wow.
Talk about scary.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Something coming out of their mouth like a gas, just to maybe make them pass out, or you don't hear about things like that again. I think, like that leads me to think, because I can't see, ET being this really evolved beings, behaving in such a way. I could be wrong, but I could see military doing that, because their methods would have been fairly primitive of the time and evolve as the reverse engineering, let's say, evolves, as a technology evolves. Just my 2 cents worth.
Yeah. Well, none of it makes sense at all, but you're probably dealing with something that isn't human, so there's no reason why it should make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave. Okay. Here we go. Also demons. Yeah, or they can just mistake them as. I mean, I could see if you're looking at extraterrestrials, looking at a big Draco might look like it.
Yeah, I don't think you
could
could
be a little
call them-
imposing. So
My opinion, I don't think you can call them one. I think it's one or the other, and like you said, they can
Not high
resemble
consciousness.
them.
well, I mean, that's part of it, perception. I mean, you have people who believe strictly in religion and not in UFOs or extraterrestrials, and you have people who are the other way, who don't believe in, it's like one or the other. They don't believe in religion. It's all extraterrestrials. It's
Yeah,
And
I
you
like a little bit of variety in my life.
a little bit of variety is always good, for sure.
I like to think there's aliens, there's demons. It's just the way we look
It's-
at them. Whether or not they're from space, we don't really know. But
It's a big universe, So, what are your thoughts on extraterrestrials? I mean, before we get into the whole, UFOs, it's so vague because it's unidentified flying object. It could be pretty much anything. I mean, technically, even though we're all looking for something, right? I mean, I think I just read today that the new disclosure, because didn't the Senate meet or something based on the disclosure they did in June? They had to sit on it and tweak it or do something. And apparently this has been released, if I'm not mistaken. And apparently they're putting an end to hiding UFOs because none of us ever saw them, So,
yeah, I don't believe that.
Well,
yeah.
I just need some notes, and I can't find them now.
Oh,
Just
It's okay.
somebody high in the military, the director of national intelligence or something,
right.
said that, why can't I find this? I just now wrote it, that
I'll see if I can find this one too.
somebody, that they ought to set up a government, here it is. They ought to set up a government, Averill Haines said they should set up a government, something in the government to investigate UFOs.
Yes.
And this seems real high in Director of National Intelligence.
Mhm.
But a lot of other people have been coming out saying things like that after that government report.
Yeah, because honestly, something came across my desk today. In the headlines, it goes, government is finally ready to, after, I guess, there's something disclosure that was just done. So they must have reviewed it because I guess they were all off for the summer when the preliminary disclosure was, released. And they said, okay, they're putting an end to basically hiding the fact that UFOs exist and that there is potentially life out there. Because I laugh because I'm like, everybody's got a cell
I was
phone,
just
man.
gonna say, but that's why
You got
they
some
have
of the
to do
best
it.
cameras in there.
Yeah.
People get better stuff than the government's releasing. So,
Well,
it's kind of hard to say, no, it's not a thing. It doesn't exist. We believe you, government.
that's why they
No.
have to come out. They have to come clean because
Well-
there's just too many videos and photos everywhere.
That's just it. And I thought that was really interesting to see that today. I was just
Yeah.
sort of like, oh, wow, okay, that's something new. I'll have to try to find it and I'll send it off to you because I try to save these articles, when I'm doing the Gray Zone on Saturdays because it's all information based. Anyway, I thought that was really interesting. I'm like, okay, somebody caved and decided, all right, we're just going to put this out there and go from there. But UFOs are one thing. Extraterrestrials are another thing. Paul Hillier really believed, retired Canadian Minister of Defense, believed that there were several species that he himself had experiences with.
Well, in my opinion, my very first experience from when we were kids, there was this thing in our room. It looked like a little piece of metal. It looked like basically a real Tic Tac.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
it was flying around and it seemed to know where it was going.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like we were under thought control because we both must have woke up at the same time when the thing was in there. We had no idea how it got in,
Right.
but then we both saw it flying around. And then suddenly, all at once, we were both terrified. It was like something was in our minds controlling our brains or something. And,
Oh.
That was a real early experience, but it was still like, we didn't see anything alive, but it behaved like it was alive.
Mhm.
And,
But there's some kind of intelligence directing it.
Mhm.
or whatever. I mean, maybe what we saw wasn't the whole thing or something. Maybe they can make you see things.
Right.
They say all these different species that look differently, that, well, they may be able to make people see all kinds of things because they may
I
be able
believe
to
that.
control your mind a little bit.
I believe that they have the ability to make you see what they want you to see. Some people say, oh, maybe they shapeshift. I think it's more mindset. I think that they can make you see what they want you to, how they want you to see
Yeah.
them.
Not necessarily moving themselves, just
Right.
moving your perception.
Yeah, exactly.
That is just creepy.
So
It's just
yeah.
creepy.
Understand.
This stuff always freaks me out.
I keep telling her she's had experiences. She just won't believe it.
I
You're
believe in them. I believe they're around, but I've never seen a UFO. I've never seen anything. So I just talk to dead people. That's all I can do.
Or aliens.
What?
That's all I can do is
Or
just
aliens.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I've never talked to a dead person, so that's something different too.
It's very well.
Hey,
It's
Mike.
been my entire life, so I really don't have a choice. I don't know any different. But
Oh, hold on. This
I
is what
wish I could remember if I did have an experience. I would love to remember it. Oh, Dave says, I believe it can be either they can control you and you can control them. Wow.
I'd like to see that one.
I don't think you can control them. That's just my opinion, but
Depending on the situation, it's a good thing to throw
Yeah.
that in there.
I
Yes.
really think that they are far superior than we are, and I don't think we can control them at all. If we could, I don't think we'd be debating it right now.
I have no idea.
Right.
My own experience, I didn't feel in control. But
Right.
The government can't control them. I don't.
That we know of. They're not going to just come out and say, hey, we've got a bunker full of them. So
if you could control them, I'm sure they'd be, beating their chest and everything, saying, "Whoa, you can control them."
Exactly.
Thank you. That's what I think. Yeah.
Exactly. So basically, you Pensacola, you've basically, I guess, got a lot more information out. Philip is very versed, obviously. He's just like, I always say, like, you've got to be the UFO guru. It's like,
He really investigates. He finds everything. He's like Sherlock Holmes or something.
Oh, I know. Oh, he'll be on the show too.
I think you're pretty amazing.
Yes. I know. Kudos to you for this is a really difficult field. It really is a difficult field. And now, I mean, you worked also as a field investigator, or you worked with MUFON?
Yeah.
Right. And what did you do for them? Because that's a whole lot of stuff coming your way also. But it's hit and miss with MUFON. Some people love them, some people not so much.
Well, like I said, I got into it because these people from Ohio contacted me. And first of all, they belonged to their own organization, which was called MORA, Mid-Ohio Research Associates. But then they converted the thing to MUFON and became a MUFON thing. And so at that time, I was investigating UFOs and just going out and interviewing people and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. And did you at any time say to yourself, no, this stuff just isn't a thing? Or do you truly believe that there's something out there that's just sort of being, kept from the world?
Well, I worked for the DIA, and like I said there, I had that experience when I was working for the DIA. I had a PhD position. It was fairly high. And security clearance. And then that happened to me. And of course, I couldn't talk about it. But I was in air order of battle at that time. And our work was, it was, in communist country, so it was real secured. And it was using satellite photography.
Mm-hmm.
We were identifying aircraft from the satellite looking down.
Right.
And the DIA keeps track of all the military equipment all over the world, probably
Wow.
even friendly countries. And
Wow.
so I mentioned just in general something about UFOs. I didn't say I saw one.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't say that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I was expecting to get just harassed like crazy, especially, with that kind of working environment.
Yeah.
But my supervisors didn't harass me. They said that they had reported that right before I said that they had reported a UFO from our highly classified film to their supervisors.
Right.
And they showed me, I could look it up and see it myself. And that their supervisors had rejected what they saw and said it wasn't there, it was a spot on the film. Well, it was on 2 different photographs, so it wasn't a spot on the film.
Mm-hmm.
Besides that, they had sent it to some specialists to see whether it was a spot on the film. The specialist said no. But their supervisors still said it was a spot on the film. And so that made no sense photographically whatsoever. And these were top people, for that area of the ground. They were the top people to identify aircraft. And their supervisor said, oh, no, you didn't see it. There's a spot on the film. And that made me think way, way back then that somebody up above is suppressing information. And that was the DIA. And the DIA is what today is putting out these videos of, the UFOs and everything. So I thought way back that somebody was suppressing that information in the government then.
Pretty early on. We're going to take a little pause and do a station and sponsor ID.
It's Folgers time. If you're tuning in just now, you are listening to the
Right.
Yes. It's
All
like
right.
I feel like manna with the letters. You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and myself, Amelia Pisano. Tonight, our fabulous, fabulous, and amazing guest is Dr. Irena Scott. If you missed it, just wait a bit and wait for the archive. It'll be up shortly after the show. You don't want to miss any of this information tonight. We are broadcasting live from the gorgeous city of New Orleans on 105.3 FM radio. And we are streaming live right now, I believe, on United Paranormal Radio, right? I can't even remember how to say it.
International.
And International Public Radio. Right. Tonight, if you caught our amazing intro, and then please wait for that outro, because we have, courtesy of the incredible, award-winning Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, Justin Snicker, has created our intro and outro for us, which is a huge honor. And he sponsors us with that every night, twice a week. So if you'd like to purchase any of his music, please check him out on Bandcamp and Amazon, or go straight to his Facebook page or Instagram page, where you can connect with the link and purchase his music or listen to what he's got out there. He's got a lot of different stuff. And remember, he's award-winning. Tonight and every night, we are sponsored by the amazing people at Folgers Coffee right from day one. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you, Folgers, so much. And
absolutely. We're back. And we're back to you, Irena. So,
I gave you a break.
That's it.
30 seconds.
That's it. My gosh. Okay, so what do you have in the works now? I mean, you've got this amazing book that's out, and where do you go from there? I mean, everybody's interested in that event, but there are so many more, and it sounds like you've investigated quite a few.
Well, Philip Mantle and I are working on another book, and that's on the same subject. There were so many witnesses that we interviewed a lot more, and the next book we're planning will be more witnesses for Pascagoula. It's
Wow, that many.
Oh,
about the best documented of any abduction account now.
I would not have guessed that. I would not have guessed it. I've seen it come up in literature here and there, and we Joe and I, kind of spun off of it with that other story on the other show on Saturday, and when I saw the title of the book, I was like, oh, kind of went in and had a look. I'm like, there's really a lot of information, but are you still getting, like, were all your eyewitness account testimonials? Did you collect all that a few years ago, or are they still coming in?
Well, like I said, there were 50 known reports of UFOs that same night to the police.
Right, yeah. Right.
Maybe that's another reason they believed him. And then there were also unofficial reports. But I've interviewed a number of people,
Right,
who said they were among these 50
right.
and or more that saw things. And what was interesting about them is that often when you get a UFO report, somebody says, well, they saw something that flew away, and that was it. But these were much more detailed accounts, and it was almost like something was flying around trying to abduct people back then.
Yeah.
They were real detailed accounts.
Well, it sounds like they were at it all night. Like, I'm just wondering are there still witnesses coming forward with something like this?
Yes, there are.
Really?
Uh-huh. We're still getting witnesses. One was the Blair family, like I mentioned. Another one.
Oh yeah, we didn't want to interrupt you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah. Part 2 question. From the experiences that she has collected, what system does she use to categorize the type of experiences in addition? It's a 2-part question. I get it. Okay. Criteria do you look for in distinguishing UFOs from other known aircrafts? Okay. So we'll come back to that. We'll let you just go back to what you were going to say first.
Well, there were other witnesses, and one of the criticisms was that there were people, they weren't too far from the freeway. Route 90 went across the Pascagoula River close to them, and there were workers like crane operators. And one of the criticisms was that, well, why didn't these other people see anything? So one of the first people I interviewed was a crane operator. He was out there that night too. And you wouldn't think, you wouldn't think back to October the 11th, 1973 as something you could remember. But in this case, something happened, and you have something to, latch it onto in your mind if something unusual happened, and then the next day you heard of an abduction. And that was, I found the date from my sound that same way, and I can date it. But anyway, there was a crane operator that I interviewed, and he said he was in this big crane at that time. It was a big crane. And he said, actually, his crane showed up in one of the pictures in Calvin Parker's books.
Wow.
And he said that night he was working, and he saw this weird looking thing. He described it as sort of transparent, kind of like plastic. It was flying around. It was blue. And he didn't know what it was and thought it was really weird looking. But then the crane was having trouble, and his supervisor said, look down and turn this lever and do this and that. So he had to pay attention to that because it was a big crane, and then later he looked and he didn't see anything. But he thought this thing he saw was very, very strange, and he said it was blue, and it was like, he compared it to a welding light at night, but he said it was something like sort of transparent and sort of like he could see through it, and he just couldn't understand what it was. So that was another witness for that. Another person I talked to said that he had 4 cousins that were brothers, and that they had been out on this place called Dolphin Island in a dune buggy. I forget what they were doing, but they were coming back and they got stuck. And they were trying to pull this dune buggy out of the mud or whatever, and they were in sand or something. They were trying to dig it out with their hands and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get it out. And then he said this thing came over him and flew over him and shone a real bright light on him. And he said it was so bright that they could see different colors in the grains of sand. It was really weird. And so they were terrified, obviously. And he said somehow he got superhuman strength and that they just sort of lifted the dune buggy off the sand and got on the dune buggy and got out of there as fast as they could. And then he said they came back and he was making fun of him and saying, oh, yeah, sure. And the next day, then the abduction story came out. And then he believed him. And so anyway, he was trying to link us up so that I could talk to all four of them, but we never got together. But that was another sighting. Dolphin Island was kind of just out from the Pascagoula River.
Right. Right.
And then there were a number of other ones of people that this one man said he was driving across the freeway and this thing was up above him and this orb came down and was right in front of their windshield as they were driving along and looked like it was taking pictures of them or something. And he said they were just like they were paralyzed or something, that something just was wrong. And then the thing flew away and then it was kind of like they came out of a trance and they said what was going on. And they were on their way, I think, to New Orleans. And then after that happened to them, they turned around, came back, and they didn't go for like another month or something. And it sounded like they were confused about all kinds of things. One of the people was real famous. He's dead now. But this was also a pretty unusual thing. It was like something was flying around that was really having close encounters with people at the same time as the abduction.
Were they getting missing time? Like, once with that feeling of being paralyzed when they came out of it, was missing time?
He didn't say they had missing time. He didn't say, abduction, but he just said they just seemed to be confused.
Yeah.
They were heading toward New Orleans and they turned around and came back and they just didn't seem to do anything for a month. Finally, in New Orleans, and it seemed like they were just confused.
Wow. Do you ever have experiencers tell you that they've come back, they have injuries that they can't explain?
I don't think so, but I've heard that a lot from other people.
Yeah.
So I had asked if you're still 50 years later, you're still getting people coming forward as eyewitnesses and talking about their experiences with this specific event.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me that so many years later they're like, why not? Why? I mean, I could see why they wouldn't want to speak up, but how are your details after that? Like, can you really take it? Let's not say take it seriously. That's not the right term that I want to use, but I mean, I can't remember things 50 years ago. Things seem fuzzy,
How accurate is it?
Yeah, how accurate. Yeah.
Well, a lot of people ask that. And from what I do, I just collect everything I can. I mean, I tape record people and I ask, did you tell anybody at this time when it happened? Did you tell? And I try to collect what information, everything I can, because I can't really investigate, but I can get the names of who else they might have.
Yeah, I'm thinking like hypnosis or something. Has anybody gone for hypnosis to try to really figure out what happened?
Well, the woman that her husband said they were abducted.
Yeah.
She's interested in hypnosis, but her husband died, and
Right.
she's so upset about that. So we don't know
Yeah.
about doing hypnosis on her,
Mm-hmm.
but she's interested.
Mm-hmm.
But I just check every detail I can. But everybody says, this is 50 years ago. But on the other hand, if something's really striking,
Right.
such as abduction,
Yeah.
Mhm.
not something you forget about. I mean, you can, if nothing happened on October the 11th, 1973, except you ate supper and went to bed, you wouldn't remember.
Sure.
If there was an
Yeah.
abduction and you had seen a UFO the same,
Mhm.
day before or something.
Oh, it's pretty
That's a great
substantial.
point.
It's
That's
just
a great
these
point.
things just
Yeah.
seem to scrub the memory, or
Yeah.
loop the memory. So
Well, I mean, I
know.
remember getting that phone call from my mother, and if I
Yes.
hadn't found out later about all that, I would never pay attention to it. I would just think, well, what was wrong with my mother?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Kind of
True
like
enough.
childbirth. You don't forget it.
True enough.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back to Zach Mann's two-part question then. From the experiences that you've collected, what system do you use to categorize the type of experiences? And in addition, what criteria do you look for in distinguishing UFOs from, let's say, other known aircrafts?
Well, I usually just collect everything I possibly can, and then investigate later. And some of them are pretty involved. Like there was one instance that another person I investigated where these people saw these objects flying around their cornfield. They were flashing, dancing lights flying around their cornfield.
Mm.
And they watched them, and they reported it to like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the police and the airport and the TV station and the radio station. They reported all to everything they could think of what was going on, and it kept on going on. It didn't stop. These things were just flashing. And so the police came out, and the police looked, and the police couldn't figure out what they were and went back home.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
One of them came down and followed a car along the road. And then afterwards, they reported to all these airports and things. And then a airplane came and began to fly in a grid over the field. And one of the things flew up to the airplane and followed it for a while. But they didn't know where the airplane came from. But they'd reported it all over, and it had been investigated because the police had come out and looked, and the police had no idea what was going on either. So that was pretty good because it lasted a long time, which is very unusual.
Mhm.
Witnesses and authority witnesses.
There's many pilots that are witnesses to UFOs in the sky. And I believe that law enforcement is just right under that because they're out there at night when no one else is. They're doing their patrol, and all of a sudden, it's like these lights in the sky. And how many of them don't say anything because of fear of losing their jobs? Because you would be seen as mentally unstable to be able to perform your duties as an officer. That is got to be a lot of pressure.
That was like that police chief. I'm just bringing it up. Jeff Greenhaw, October 17th, 1973. He was a police chief for Falkville, Alabama. Emergency call came in around 10 p.m. From a frantic woman who claimed she saw it. So there were more people than just the sheriff. The sheriff was off duty, or the chief, and he went in thinking someone was in distress. So he just ran out there, grabbed his camera. I'm just giving a condensed version. He chased this thing in his truck, slid off the road as this creature slipped away into the darkness. He had his Polaroid camera, much like you. And he basically could see that this thing looked pretty much robotic. He said Here's the description that he gave. As he got closer, the truck headlights shone on the being. He came to the realization that he was seeing an entity wearing a metallic silver suit. He claimed that it looked like aluminum foil. He went on to say that it looked to be the size of a child or an ape. He said the head and the neck seemed to be all one thing. Almost sounds like a helmet. He said he noticed that it seemed to have a little antenna coming out of the top of its head, and its movements were jerky, almost mechanical, and it ran in a strange way, but it ran faster than any human he had ever seen. Skeptics have tried to debunk the photos. They've not been able to do that. And what was interesting about this is that it was a few days after the famous Pascagoula abduction case of the 2 dock workers on October the 11th. So this was 6 days later. Many believed that his sighting was staged to try to discredit the Pascagoula case. There, I just wanted to read that off here. I was trying to bring that up earlier. So,
Yeah, I heard of it, and I don't know. I think it needs more investigation. It had been investigated, and I mean, I'm not down in Alabama, and I can't do anything about it. But maybe somebody.
Yeah, there's newspaper articles on it, and he lost his job over it. Which is sort of sad because you're chief of police.
I know, but you're considered unstable, especially in 73 when you didn't have what we have now with the internet and movies and everything.
Well,
and
that's what we were all saying, right? Like you just couldn't, it was like taboo, especially as a working man.
So. And of course, in 1973, Polaroids were used for crime scenes, accidents, and such, because they needed the photos right away. So it was excellent that he had.
They haven't been able to debunk the picture.
No.
But it's just figuring out what is it exactly.
You can't debunk a Polaroid.
No. Well, they're saying now that they can affect the digital cameras electronically.
Yes.
But I think I took a Polaroid of that thing I saw.
Yes.
I couldn't figure out for a long time. And finally I wrote to several people, and they said that it had a squiggle, but it had 2 squiggles, and they were a little bit different. And I finally figured out when I took the picture, the thing was a long ways away. I don't know how it got so far away, but it was, when we'd seen it close, it had 7 windows. When it was far away, it just looked like one blinking light because it was so far away you couldn't see the 7 windows.
Wow.
Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but what I had was 2 blinks, but each blink had 2 traces, and the 2 traces were different. And I hadn't figured out anything about it, and I went to somebody and said, these are 2 traces of something that the 2 lights are moving together. Well, I finally figured out, because I only saw 1 light, but I photographed 2. So that there were 2 lights that my camera was taking a picture of that I couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
And that I called the Polaroid company, and they said that in the infrared, the ultraviolet, that it would photograph into the ultraviolet things that you couldn't see with your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So my 2 traces were a little bit different of the 2 blinks. And so I wrote that up in a scientific journal saying that there was a light on the object that wasn't in a visible range.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the high-speed film that you had that night?
Yeah, I had 3,000 ASA black and white film.
Yeah, that's impressive. That would pick up in the UV. That makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So, but so I speculated in another book that they can send out light that's not in our visible range, but they could affect cameras that way too by shining into any camera and affecting the photography. So when they say
interesting.
Pictures, well,
I
there's
always
reasons.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would not have guessed that they could do that.
I always wonder if they can change our perception in our minds. Can they change the perception that you're picking up on film or on digital? Yeah. Right?
Well, that's what I think. And both ways. They can change. The same time I was giving a speech on it, somebody else was giving a speech, and they said they took a picture of a UFO, and what showed up was a star, a perfect 5-pointed star in the photography, and they couldn't figure out how that could happen. Well, the UFOs are, if they're way past our ability to do things, they can affect our photography, in my opinion. I mean, I just speculated all through the book that maybe some UFOs are holograms or something, and if you take a picture of them, who knows what you take a picture of? If you take a picture of a hologram or a volumetric display or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a split second.
Yeah.
You don't know the movement, the energy coming off of it, the energy field it's creating. You don't, and of course it would show up red or green because the black and white always picks that up if something's really high and fast. It will create that
That's
on
true.
the film.
Yes. Yeah, so I think, when they say you can't take a picture, well, if you take a picture of a barn, everybody can stand out there and look at the barn and the picture turns out. If you're taking a picture of something like a UFO, well, you don't know what you're taking a picture of. You don't know whether it's real or an image or thought control or what.
That's true. That's true. That's a good point. It's like, Joe was also saying, if you're taking a picture of, like, let's say of a window, if you've had an abduction, new windows apparently will not show any of these imprints, but old windows, like from the 1800s, like really old windows, apparently if they pass through that, you can capture that image on film.
Yeah.
Well, I did not know that. All these windows are freaking 1872. This guy is going to be out there taking pictures out of every stinking one of them.
Yeah. because new windows
I know I've had company.
Yeah, they give a different image. In fact, it's really funny that you see that, Michelle, because yesterday I saw an advertisement, because I have to change the windows in my house.
Yes.
And I saw an advertisement of a glass company that has changed to give a more accurate image of the outside. Just like your sunglasses, when your sunglasses go on, the colors are truer.
Right.
They're doing windows like that now. I wonder if they're just going back to what we had before. Because they're polarized and they reflect sun.
Yes, Dave, I believe that's what it is. Maybe the lead in the glass. These are just solid. They're just windows. They're just, they hold an imprint.
That's pretty cool. I live in an old house that my grandparents built, and it has glass windows as opposed to the new windows. So maybe
it's the same idea. Maybe you need to go take pictures of all your windows to see if you're still getting visits.
You don't have that film that the new windows have to reflect the sunlight back to keep the heat from penetrating through the glass.
I find that fascinating because that's, that seems to be a little bit of a science thing right there.
I know of no abduction that went, in this house. So,
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's same. Yeah. Here, there's been a lot of visits and stuff like that here. So it doesn't alarm me at all anymore. But it would be nice to actually, get that $1 million capture. But there's stuff all over the freaking place down here. But the military base isn't very far, so I imagine they have to be pretty careful, or they're going to get picked up. Because there's been some that are shot right out of the river, and next thing you know, you've got like jets, just helicopters or jet just going right after them. We just sit here, you're going to hear it all going. It's like, oh yeah, something's out in the river. So, okay. But I don't know. It's fascinating. So as we're nearing, of course, the end of this segment, this is the part where you tell everybody what you have coming up, how to find you. Stage is yours.
My book is Beyond Pascagoula.
There we go.
Yes.
We can see that. Perfect.
Beyond Pascagoula, the rest of the amazing story. And it's on for sale on Amazon.com.
Okay.
And people should be able to find it by just going on Amazon.com or saying Beyond Pascagoula, because I don't think anything else has that name.
Right.
No, they can also enter your name and you'll come up. Your book will come up.
That's true.
And I have a website, irenascott.com, and I have all my books on there. And if you just click on a book, it should go to Amazon.com to order it. and my book gives a lot more detail about a whole lot of other things that were going on at the same time as the abduction and during the big flap that was happening. It gives a lot of detail on the sound, which was really mysterious.
Yes. I'd love to know more about that. That's crazy.
Well, I had a lot of diagrams and tables and everything else from the sound, because usually with UFOs, you just have one witness and, a fast sighting. Well, this sound was heard by all over big cities, all over Washington, D.C., and all kinds of things. And so I don't know why nobody investigated it except me, but I'm investigating it.
I know, that's insane. Like Dave said, it went through 2 time zones. That's crazy.
Well, and you could time it because, like, it'd go from one city would report a time, and then the next city would report a time. It was, right across the country. Plus, it hit 2 seismograph stations, which were some distance apart, which is pretty weird, but you could get an exact speed at that time. Another thing I'm doing, I'll be in the UFO mega conference in speaking in Las Vegas in March.
Oh, nice.
Fantastic. And they can find that on your website or your Facebook.
You might find me there.
I haven't put it on the website yet, but I need to put it on there, so I'm going to.
Okay.
Also, I'm on Facebook, and people can ask questions whether they're on Facebook or not.
Okay. Yeah, that's the Zach Man says. Thank you for answering my questions, Irena. And big good night to you as well. And yes, Zach, we will see you tomorrow night. And last but not least, here we go. I remember a cop UFO encounter in the UK in the early 80s where the UFO had landed in the middle of the road in front of the cop's patrol car. Then it was gone and he lost time. Yeah, that's pretty standard, I'm thinking. So thank you, Irena, for joining us. My gosh, it was such a pleasure. You're so delightful. I just love your stories.
I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much. I'm so honored. Thank you.
Yes. So
thank you very much. I was sure glad to be here and to talk to
it's our pleasure.
Oh, really
very
is.
fantastic people. And
well, we're very laid back, as you can see. It's very comfortable. We're not like drill sergeants.
You have a lot of listeners.
Absolutely, we do.
We're very lucky that way. Yeah.
That's right.
Very
You definitely will have a good audience tonight. So the archive will be up soon as well, and the archives do really well also. So
well, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the time and the interview. And
my pleasure.
Everything else.
The honor and the appreciation is ours. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care now.
Take care. Bye-bye. Oh, Janie, thank you.
Yeah.
Janie Mash Princess, thank you. Dr. Scott, awesome time. I'm definitely buying your book, Janie Mashburn. Thank you.
There we go. That's nice.
She's a fabulous woman. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Dr. Irena. And now we go to the end segment. So we've come to the end, of course, of a fantastic segment. She's so delightful. Isn't she just great? But thank you to Dr. Irena Scott, Joe Montaldo. We know he was back there in chat for a little bit. Big, huge thank you to Folgers Coffee for, taking care of us as always. Big, huge thank you to Dr. Snick, a.k.a. Justin Snicker. Remember to stop by the YouTube channels and subscribe if you want to drop us a line. Oh, yeah, don't forget to go to Facebook. Like us up. We're likable. Anyway, you want to communicate with us directly, go to the Outer Realm Contact at gmail.com, the Outer Realm Contact at gmail.com. Remember to tune in tomorrow night. We welcome back another amazing guest, Tom Conwell, and he's going to be recapping on his research of mapping UFO sightings, and then he's going to branch off on his theory that ETs are already here. That's right. ETs are already here. So don't want to miss that. Till then, y'all behave. Amelia and I will see you tomorrow night.
been listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, airing live every Wednesday and Thursday evening, 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 to 10 p.m. Central, on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.